I'd like to first introduce myself. I'm David Boloker. I work for IBM in emerging technologies, and one of the things that we're actually going to show you today is an interface and on top of Cloud Foundry, the whole user interface that we actually built. It's actually called Bluemix. My two colleagues here, James Thomas and Carl Osipov, actually are going to show you different pieces of the technologies that we actually have available for you to use so that you can first look at Cloud Foundry and Bluemix, second actually see how all the pieces work, how you can push things up, pull things down. So with that in mind, let's kind of move forward here in that every single person in the room, the first thing you always start with is that first line of code. Okay? Whether you started in the early Java days or earlier than that, or you're starting on Node, everything starts out with one line of code, and then one day actually that one line of code can actually give you $1 billion idea. And as you start thinking about that idea, you start thinking about developers, how do I develop the code, what infrastructure is necessary, what language do I want to write in, and then you start moving on from there and you say, well, I really need to understand the problem. I need to explore exactly what I need to do, how I can do it, what's available to me, start actually prototyping that, and then actually get to the next step, which is all about how do I evaluate it, reevaluate it, and actually go through this loop. Every one of us has done this, and you know, some people call it tinkering, some people call it playing. So as you start thinking about where we've actually moved in the last 15 to 20 years, when we started with Java, we actually had a language and a runtime that pretty much was very ubiquitous, okay? And we actually compiled and ran. Next really thing that we started to think about was we were mostly in the IT shop. What's actually happened over the years is some of the movement has been away from IT shops. It's actually been to the marketing side where they were really looking for us to create applications that were available pretty much immediately. They actually not only wanted them immediately, they wanted to put them up and take them down. And they wanted almost no time to actually develop and test. So as you start thinking about how do I create that environment, because remember we would have to create the virtual, we'd have to get Linux, the virtual machine, Linux, Java, etc., and build the actual code to do all this. It takes a couple of days, especially if you have an IT shop to do this, but they actually are really looking at doing it immediately like that. Okay, so the first thing you really got to think about is how can I actually start looking at taking code that I have, cloning it, modifying it, testing it, deploying it, and do this iteratively and do it very, very quickly, and by the way, do it for almost no cost. And that really is where a lot of the cloud discussion is today. And that's actually where the whole discussion around Cloud Foundry is, because it really is start small. We're going to actually show you 4 pieces of code today that probably each one took us a couple of days at most to write, as well as call out to third-party services. And that's actually one of the key things that we're going to talk about. The other thing you have to start thinking about environments is you want to have lots of freedoms. One of them is freedom to code in any language as we start moving. Because you actually may come at this from a Java side, you may come at from a PHP side, or you may want Scala or Python. And that really needs to be in the environment itself. But again, you want to set up that environment that it's very, very quick. And you can immediately get to it. But the other side of it is you really want to leverage everything that's gone on in the last 10 plus years in terms of REST-based services. Everything that's out there you want to be able to use, whether it's in the public domain or it's actually in your private domain. And the other side of it is you want self-service, and all of these things are how do I move things much quicker than they actually are. So one of the other things you have to start thinking about when you do rapid prototyping is ideas. Every one of us, when we come to a project, has a pretty much structured view of how it is. Well, this is kind of the way a lot of the marketing folks do things. Okay? Lots of different ideas, and you actually have to start picking and choosing and coding an awful lot of them. And that really brought us into this whole idea of prototyping rapidly, which really kind of gets us to this next point, which let's go dig down a little deeper here and say, well, does everyone in the audience know the difference between platform as service, infrastructure as a service, etc.? A couple. Okay. So what I did on this chart actually kind of walks you through the differences. Okay, which is managed by you in the case, for example, of traditional IT where you create everything versus what in the infrastructure as services will actually, the provider will worry about the data center, how to network things. They'll give you actually a fast network. They'll give you storage, servers, virtualization, and some OSs around. And then you're required to do everything else. In the case of a platform as a service, that line moves all the way up to the runtime. And what we're going to show you today is a platform as a service where we'll give you all those runtimes. You just create your application and then deploy it. And then intervally deploy it, I might add. And then software as a service goes all the way up the stack. So as we start thinking kind of how to move forward, let's dig a little deeper into Cloud Foundry. So Cloud Foundry actually is a piece of open source code. Can run, it's available today. It's built on basically, it's an Apache 2 license on it. And there's actually a foundation with 35 folks that are actually trying to move it forward. It runs any language you want, takes any build pack from other systems like Heroku and imports them. And then you can start looking at the whole question of integration. I want to integrate pieces from my host system. I want them from the public domain. Let's say I want to use Twitter. Let's say I want to use things from my local bank, or I want to use LinkedIn, whatever. Everything is available through a REST service. The other side of this is it's really designed for pretty much mobile. It's all mobile first oriented. So the whole, not only the user interface, but all of the connectivity. So this slide really talks into what I'm talking about, whether it's IBM or not. The really question here is you can actually start looking at taking your services that you actually are buying from third parties, publicly available, and your own, and use them on a single platform. Clearly doing either two things, through calls through REST-based services or through service brokers. In the case of IBM's version of Cloud Foundry, which is actually called Bluemix, all of the checked services are actually available today. Okay, Bluemix is actually in beta today. We'll get into this in a little bit later. But the key is when you start thinking about it, since we're actually giving you everything up to the platform, all of these services are available for you to pick and choose what you want to use. Again, it's all about that speed of the creation of the application. So again, let's come back to the whole concept of cloudfoundry.org. They actually are creating the open source platform, okay, clearly with a lot of developer focus, not only on the language side, but also on the data side, as well as looking at add-ons, caching, for example. And you look at community building, and these are all the companies that actually just built cloudfoundry.org, as well as these are all the runtimes that are available there. Pretty much you can pick and choose what languages you want to use, as I said earlier. And if you look at the health of the community, okay, the community's had about over 1,000 individual contributors for about 600,000 lines of code. Okay, key things here: pull requests, and a very vibrant community moving forward. And the community itself is really focused on, okay, how do I actually get that app, the whole app dev model in a much more faster way than we've ever done it before? And again, it's all about simple command line, or you actually can use user interface. And standard, what I'll call standard way of doing business, from compose the app, deploy it, update it, scale it after you're done. And this is all done with a simple user interface. So on this chart really talks to a couple of different points. How applications get written and loaded into the system through basically applications loaded through what they call a DEA. Not very important right now, but you can actually get and load them. These two pieces are actually what IBM has been very much focused on, is the user interface and the APIs, as well as the service calls. With a couple of things to add to that. What I want to do from this point on is actually jump directly into code. Show you guys not only what Cloud Foundry is, what Bluemix is, but look at the code, look at how to move forward. First person on the agenda is James. And James is actually going to walk you through two things. Looking at a Java application, and the second thing is actually looking at a application that we wrote. Very simple to do. We use Cloudant on the back end, which is a cloud database. We actually just write a record to it, and we actually do it for multiple languages.
Okay, so hey everybody, my name's James. I'm a developer advocate for Bluemix, and I'll take you through a real intro to the platform and look how quickly it is to get your application up and running. And think about all the stuff that we're not going to do. We're not going to install a server or put a database on and configure it and do hosting. So when you come into the platform, people usually start on this page, which is the catalog. And the catalog really gives you a couple of things. It gives you boilerplates, the option to play with some runtimes, and then the services, which David talked about. So boilerplates are what you think of as pre-canned applications. So these are, if I've got a specific use case, like I want a Java web app, or I want mobile cloud, these will provide you with a boilerplate to get started really quickly. So some pre-canned kind of skeleton applications with their code outline and the services that you're going to use that you can use to deploy and get started much, much quicker for half a dozen specific use cases, whether it's IoT or mobile, Node.js and Java. But you can, you might want to start from fresh. So you might want to start directly from the runtime. I've got a new app. It's going to be using Java. I just want to provision a new Java app server in the cloud and get that up and running. You can see out of the box, Cloud Foundry supports a number of different runtimes. So Java, Node.js, Ruby. And one of the interesting things about Cloud Foundry being an open source PaaS is that you can, as David said, bring your own runtimes. That means you can go and get one of the community build packs from open source and integrate almost any language. If you want to do Python or different versions of Java, JavaScript, Ruby, it's very easy using Cloud Foundry to be able to add that in. So it's completely flexible. If you look at some of the other PaaSes, they don't provide that ability to completely customize the runtime and really customize it for your needs. So that is, I think, a huge strength of Cloud Foundry as an open source PaaS, is it's completely customizable to your application runtime. And then going further down, the next thing, obviously once you've provisioned your runtime, you're going to want to take some services. So traditionally, if you wanted a database, you have to go and download it, install it, configure it, set it up. With the kind of SaaS offerings that come with Cloud Foundry and Bluemix, it's really, really easy to go and get some of these offerings, and we'll see in a minute how you do that and integrate them into applications. So all of the traditional application services that you're going to want to use, whether it's database server or security or backend, or how do I do IoT or mobile, how do I bridge to my kind of system of record, Cloud Foundry and Bluemix makes it really easy to add that into your app. And what you do is when you add them into your app, you get the credentials. You get a URL of where to go to connect to the service and the username and password. What you don't have to do is install it and configure it, and it's very easy to swap between different service providers. So it's much, much quicker for you as an application developer to be able to integrate all of these SaaS offerings and make developing your app much faster. So in this example, let's go back to the top and say I want to start with a raw Java runtime. So I can click this, create an app, and let's find a name. So let's call it DevOps, underscores, demo 1. And when I click create, what it'll do is it'll go and provision us a new Java application running in the cloud and set everything up. And it's going to take 30 seconds for it to go and stage the application. We'll get some information coming through showing us what's going on. And eventually, where are we? What did I call it? DevOps Java 1. Yeah, let's go into there. So in a minute it's going to start up, and we are to click on the external URL, and that will have the application up there and running. And again, while this is going on and it's staging the application, think about all the things that you're not doing and the lag time between having an idea and writing some code locally and pushing it into the cloud. Think about traditionally what you do with a normal app server on a normal tin machine that you have in your data center. So hopefully in a minute, this is real live code. There's no smoke and mirrors, so it should be up there in the Cloud Foundry cloud as soon as possible. Give it a second. Let's check the status. Okay, so it looks like it's going to be staging in a minute. So hopefully that should come through shortly, and you can see When that's up and running, the next thing we can kind of do is start to think about scaling. And one of the great things about using PaaS and cloud is it's really easy to scale up and scale down really quickly. So, adding more memory, adding more CPU time is much, much easier and quicker than it has been before. You don't have to invest upfront in infrastructure and think about, how popular is my application going to be, how much capacity I need. You can scale up and scale down really quickly using the runtime. And when that's done, you can also turn it off. So it's all pay-as-you-go. All of the infrastructure costs and the SaaS offerings are all pay-as-you-go. So it's much easier to scale up and scale down. So it looks like it's having a little bit of trouble. So we can go back to one I've already provisioned previously. So let's go to this one. Okay, so this is an example of Liberty, which is the Java runtime, very quick, very good for kind of cloud situation apps. It's very quick to start up. You can see I've got it running in the background. So this is my Java application. It just gives you a very brief overview of all the environment variables. So the thing you can do now is to say, okay, if I want to scale that up and down, I can click on the runtime. And I can easily go and say, okay, I want, quite a lot of data. So I can go, I want 10 instances, and maybe I'll drop the memory a bit so it's still under my quota. And it should go and start up 10 instances of your application quickly, and it does all of the routing automatically. So it's completely abstracted from you as a developer and from the user. It will do the routing and split the requests out round robin between the different instances. So you don't have to code for this in your application. It's just something you can take advantage of automatically. You can see there you go. Within a matter of sort of 10 seconds, we've now got 10 different versions of the app started. And we can scale it kind of horizontally as the application gets more popular. So if I go back to that app, what you'll see is down here, there's an instance ID in there. If I refresh the page, we'll start to see that the instance ID should change. There we go, right, so it's number 7, I can do it again, and it will start to spread out all the requests, and I'm completely transparent to you as a developer. So provided you follow some kind of rough application guidelines about how you architect the application and using services and not using the file system and thinking about how you use memory, it's super easy to scale up and scale down, which is really, really important when things get very, very popular. So that's that. The next thing you probably want to do again, we talk about adding services. So I can do things like add a service, and it's really easy to drop any of the palette in. So these are all SAS vendors. Again, you'll get the credentials. You don't have to worry about where it's stored or who's managing or who's backing it up. Traditionally, you might want to do something like add a database. So I can do things like, where's Redis? Redis is a popular one. I can drop it into my app. Yeah. It'll go and bounce the app. Yeah, that's fine. And when it comes back up, what you'll see is, if I go back to the web app now, you'll give you the credentials. So in the environment variable, we provide you with the credentials to be able to go and use the application. So you don't have to worry about where it is. You don't have to worry about where it started. Give it a second. I think it's still starting back up. And it's really easy to swap. So, if you're using Mongo and there's lots of different providers like MongoLab, you can swap between the different instances really, really quickly. And again, you're not worried about where things are running and who's looking after them, who's backing them up. You can take advantage of all the kind of SaaS vendors that are available today and start to use them in your app. So here we go. You can see VCAP services, the way Cloud Foundry provides you with all your credentials for your SaaS vendors that you want to integrate. You can see I've got access to a Redis instance now. It's running in the cloud. All I have to do is connect to the host name using the host and port, and I can start to put data in there. I haven't had to install it. I don't have to configure it. I don't have to do security or look after it. If I want to swap out to a different database, no problem. Go back into the Cloud Foundry, add a new service. I can swap between different providers. So it makes it really easy to get going and integrate all of those services without worrying about the infrastructure behind it. So another thing we've done as well to help people understand how they can connect to different back-end services with different apps. So again, Cloud Foundry supports polyglot languages. You can Java, Node, whatever you want. You can find a build pack for it. You can start to use it, and you can connect all your different applications to the same back-end services. So I could have many different back-end apps all connecting to, or many different kind of Cloud Foundry apps connecting to the same back-end services, which means you can share those between different languages. So if I've got a Java app and I've got a Node app, it's very easy to share data between them and communicate using this concept of kind of shared services. So we have some code on GitHub called To-Do Apps, which is a really simple way. It's a kind of, I think the hello world of cloud is like a to-do app. And they all connect to the same backend. So we've re-implemented the same front end of a to-do app in lots and lots of different languages. So you can see how would I do in Java, you know, connecting to a service, how do I do kind of starting the app up and scaling it, and you can go to the page and download it. And there's all the instructions there for how to get it going. So that's a really nice way, if you're kind of new to the platform, to think about how do I get started and how do I connect to the services and how do I configure it and use the manifest file and all that kind of stuff. And then compare in all of these different languages that we've got, you know, PHP, Python, Node, and Java, what does a Cloud Foundry app look like that you can get started with? So next, Carl's going to take you into something much more detailed, which is a real live app running on Cloud Foundry using some of the services.
Yeah, and James, do you think we have any developers in the audience?
I hope so.
Okay, so I think the screens and the UI and the slides are nice, but actually I think the developers want to see some live code. So that's what we're going to do next. And if James could hold the mic for me, that would be great. So first, I'll start with a backstory. Now, as a developer, I work a lot in the type of situations that David described earlier. Folks in marketing come over to me and they tell me 2 weeks before a conference, like the one here, you know, Carl, we have this conference coming up. We need you to build an app. And this app, let's imagine that we're working for a company that does electric cars. So this app needs to send out coupons to electric car customers, notifying them about an upcoming electric car rally. So you have 2 weeks, get it figured out. So how can I do that using Bluemix? Can Bluemix help me? So what I can do with Bluemix is actually, you know, that I can start very quickly with my preferred language. But also in the Bluemix service catalog that James just showed to you earlier, I can pull in a number of existing capabilities. For example, capabilities for sending out emails, capabilities for doing things like backend integration, geolocation. I can use all of that to help me build my application very quickly. So let me show you how I could do that. I'll start by switching over to a completed app. And I'll do that just to explain what is the end goal. What is it that I want to give my customers? Now, you'll notice here in the dashboard, I already have an instance of my application up and running. So what my marketing people want me to do is to pull in customer data, and then for every customer ID, generate a coupon that I can send out to that customer's email. So let's say I'm an existing customer, and this is what the coupon would look like. So it's a free gift coupon for an electric car charge to incentivize people to participate at an electric car rally. And people are going to be able to go in, click on a link about the charging stations, and this would automatically generate a list of these charging stations near the customer. Okay? So for example, there's one near Austin, Texas, where I live. And from here, of course, you know, if I click on the electric charging stations, that can take me to Google Maps. I can use that to figure out the closest route, get the directions, and go on from there. How would I do that with Bluemix? Well, first of all, on the Bluemix side, I can use functionality that allows me to integrate my existing backend into my app. So if I go into the catalog of services, you notice that we have here a product called Cast Iron that allows me to download a secure connector that connects my application running in the cloud to your existing on-premise database, a DB2 or an Oracle database. So that's one example. That's an IBM provided service. We also have a service from our business partner like Pitney Bowes that actually can take a customer address from that backend database and geocode it, give me the latitude and longitude coordinates to actually figure out how to place that customer's address on a map. And there's a number of other services, for example, SendGrid, that sends out emails. So let's take a look at how the SendGrid service can be integrated into my existing application. So I'll pull up my my code editor here, and first of all, I'll describe how this code works on GitHub. So the application that I'm about to show you is actually available on GitHub. If you look at codename Bluemix there, You can check out this application, run it yourself. And if you do that, I want to bring to your attention this particular file called SendGrid email. Now let me zoom in a little bit so it's easier for you guys to see. I just wanted to point out how easy it is to pull in the SendGrid service in your application and start using it to send an email. So here, starting with line 15, basically I'm calling to the Cloud Foundry environment to get that service. So the SendGrid service name just has a string describing the service. After that, I call the require SendGrid, pass in the credentials that I get through Bluemix, so I don't even need to worry about security, authentication, authorization. Bluemix takes care of that for me. And then to actually send an email, if you'll notice the rest of the code that's on the slide there, this takes in the REST request, right? The HTTP request that comes in with the to and the body parameter for the email. And all I do here is create this JSON object, JSON email object. I specify the to, which comes in for the HTTP request. I have a canned from field for the email because that's, you know, from my company. I specify a canned subject and just pass in the same body of the email that the HTTP request sends out. So in my web app, basically all I need to do is now send out that HTTP request. So this is my web app that I put together, and from here I just coded in some logic to send that HTTP request when I click on the little mail icon. And what it does is that it takes out the HTML source code right from this page and sends it to that backend that I just showed you, right? It sends out this as an REST request. So if I go into my temporary email account, for example, and pull up an email that I got for this, it comes up with the actual coupon and with the text of the email that I wanted to send out. So that's, you know, that's a very simple example of an app that you may want to build for a marketing organization. You can check it out from GitHub, try it out, and extend it as you would like to. Now, for the next demo, what we actually want to do is to build something more interesting. And for that, I'll ask David, who was here earlier, to be my assistant. And for this particular demo, actually, I'll play a role of a developer at a retail chain. So let me switch over to Xcode, and we'll play this iPad simulator. Now, let's imagine for a moment that I'm a developer at Homestead, which sells supplies for skiing fanatics, and David here is going to be one of them. And in this case, I'm supporting our company's customer relationship management application. So if you look at this, our salespeople at Homestead are using this to go in, look up the list of the customers, find out what they have been buying. So in this case, David, thank you for buying those ski boots from Homestead. And as you can see, this is typical CRM, customer relationship management type of functionality. So our salespeople can use this to go in, find out who has been buying what, maybe give them a call, ask if they're happy with their purchase, you know, maybe upsell them something. Now, the sales leadership at our company, they actually want something more. They want to make sure that they make interactions between the salespeople and the customers more personalized to customers' needs. And the mobile devices like iPads, iPhones, you know, other cell phones, smartphones out there, make it easy and make it possible for us to create these types of personalized experiences. So in this case, let's say David wants to be able to get a text message, right, before he actually receives a phone call from a salesperson, right? If it's a text message, you can look at it and decide not to have a follow-up conversation. So what would it take for us to actually implement that type of functionality, right? Let's say we have an iPad app. How would we integrate this iPad app with a messaging provider? So that's what we'll use as an example here, and let's write some code. So to start off, I'm going to switch over to my terminal, and I'll begin by just creating a new file. So this application is going to be written in JavaScript. So Node.js is going to be the underlying runtime. And on the first few lines, you see I'm just importing some libraries. In particular, Gopher is a library that helps generate web apps, makes it easy to set up routes, handle HTTP requests, and so on. And the second line here imports the Twilio library. So Twilio is a company that provides SMS, voice, and other telephony capabilities as an API. And in fact, Twilio is one of the services available from the Bluemix service catalog. Now, before this demo, I've already went out and registered on Twilio. I've set up an account there, and I got this phone number when I've created this account. So what I want to do now as a developer is to go ahead and add SMS integration into my iPad app. And to do that, I'll take the app object, and I'll just handle all routes, whether they're GET or POST. And these are going to be the routes on the SMS path for my application. Once the HTTP request comes in, I'll have a separate function that takes in a request and generates a response. And in the body of that function, we'll do a couple of things. First of all, we'll create a new variable called a client. So let's call it var client, and it's going to be based on an instance of Twilio. And all I need to do is to send a text message is call this function client, send message, and we'll pass in a JSON object. So the to field is going to be come out of the request. It's going to be a request parameter called to. The from is going to be the Twilio number that I registered earlier. And the body is going to also come in through the request. So let's pull in the param and the body. So that's all the functionality that I need to actually send the message. Now I just want to send back a response to the HTTP request saying that everything was fine. So let's say send a JSON object that says success true. Okay? So I've created this piece of functionality, right? Now, in order to take this code and upload it to Bluemix, I'm going to be using Cloud Foundry tools. So since IBM is relying on Cloud Foundry, we can use the same open source API and the same open source tooling as Cloud Foundry is using. This means that you're not getting locked in your development process. If you decide to switch to another vendor, you can do that. We think IBM has the best Cloud Foundry implementation, but if you decide to develop off the Cloud Foundry on your laptop, you can do that too. So to actually push out the code, I'll go back into my terminal, and I'll call a Cloud Foundry command called cfpush. Now what this does is that it takes all the files in my current directory, it's creating an application up in the Bluemix cloud, and it's uploading the code to Bluemix. You'll notice that it uploaded it already, and right now it's starting. So while it's starting, it's downloading all the required dependencies. You can think of this as being similar to running Maven up in the cloud. So once the dependencies are going to be out there, the code will get started, and I'll be able to use this functionality. So I expect this will probably take another 30 seconds. So to speed this up, I'll switch back to the iPad app and show you how this actually works. Well, actually, it's quicker than we expected. So let's go ahead and try out that iOS simulator again. David, do you have your iPhone on you?
Right here.
All right, so I'm going to put on the hat of a salesperson at our Homestead company and send David a text message. So David, thanks for buying those ski boots from us. Have fun on the slopes. Let's see if that works. Okay, and now assuming that I guess British Telecom cooperates. Yeah,
It's magic.
yeah. So that was just for the SMS type functionality, and using roughly the same amount of code, actually, I can go in and show you the rest of this demo. I can implement the functionality related to doing voice communication on this as well. So this is, I've added SMS. I also have functionality here to make voice calls. You can see just pass in a few tokens, make a phone call. Let's see if this can give you a ring. Calling Mr. Boloker. Well, let's try it again. Well, demigods are not here with us. But if you want to come over to our booth after the session, I'll try to call your number directly. So if you don't believe me, we'll plug in your number and I'll call you from my Twilio account in the United States. So that's, that was our Twilio demo for today. Thanks, James, and I guess we'll pass it back to David.
I think, James, why don't we actually just talk about one other thing here, which we actually can't demonstrate to you today, but it's a facility available on Bluemix called Node-RED. So take a few seconds and talk about Node-RED. Unfortunately, some of the prereqs for it are not running this morning.
So Node-RED is really about IoT and has a very nice Cloud Foundry story. And what people find is that they work in the kind of IoT space is that it's just enormous. And there's an explosion at the moment in the kind of devices that you can work with and the platforms and the tools and the technologies. And while that's fantastic and it's a rapidly growing space, what people find is when they do kind of IoT applications is there's no one technology or language or platform that you can use to integrate all of these devices. So what that means is developers, you spend a lot of time doing boilerplate. You know, I want to add my Fitbit in, or I've got a Raspberry Pi, how do I read the serial port? You end up, you know, scrolling through Stack Overflow, trying to find some demo code and hack it all together, and you spend an enormous amount of time on this kind of integration, this boilerplate, which really isn't creating value in your application. It's just plumbing, and we don't want to be doing plumbing. We want to be working on the idea that you have. And what Node-RED, again, which is an open source project which you can go and find on GitHub, allows you to do is to really easily kind of integrate all of those devices. It has kind of what they call palette nodes, and you can pull them on and send messages between them. So using technologies like MQTT, it can integrate things like Raspberry Pi and reading serial devices and Arduinos really, really easily. So it's a really nice way, if you're working in the kind of the IoT space, to be able to create these demo solutions and deploys very quickly on Cloud Foundry. So you can have one of these kind of IoT integration environments up in the cloud very, very quickly. As you saw on Bluemix, there's actually a Node-RED boilerplate. So you can have your own version of Node-RED running up in the cloud without anything locally very, very easily. It's all open source. They've got a great developer community around, and it's very easy to share these kind of, they call them message flows that you construct to connect, you know, your Raspberry Pi to your Fitbit, on some great demos for you to go and have a look at. So Node-RED is another great place if you're doing IoT on Cloud Foundry and are interested in that. You know, PaaS is great for doing IoT stuff, you know, the scalability aspect, and Node-RED fits really well on top of that as well.
Thank you. And basically, as you've seen, we kind of walked you through, not that quickly, but you know, quick enough, how you can actually look at building an application, deploying it on the platform, deploying it in many languages on the platform, and then actually looking at adding services to it, whether it was Redis, whether it was Cloud, it could be anything for that matter, or it could have been a call out to which one of on our Bluemix GitHub repository, we have calls out, for example, to LinkedIn for one of the applications. Bluemix itself is actually in beta, so everything you've seen is in beta. All of the mishaps you've seen, oh well, we're going to try to fix all those. As it's in beta, it's available to anyone for free. You can either go to bluemix.net, or you can actually just come to us at the PEDS. We'll be more than happy to sign you folks up for it. So at this point, really, we'll take questions from the audience. We left some time for that. Clearly has to be one question, even about Node-RED. You can actually see Node-RED running also in the booth. We'll get it from open source. Okay, guys. You're a rough bunch. It's actually in the same exact space Heroku's in, as Google App Engine's in, as HP's, I think Himalayas is announced last week. It's exactly in the same space. The differentiators are going to be the user interface, which we could pop to and show you that, caching, some of the services available, the breadth of the catalog, as well as some of the extensions you might see, runtimes. Will be in some, not in others, as well as the support for all of those specific runtimes as well as services.
I think one of the...
And then not to mention, when everything gets into production, the costing.
And I think when you come, I think one of the key differentiators, as David sort of alluded to, is it's open source. So it's built on Cloud Foundry, it's open source technology. Heroku's not. You're locked in. If they change their pricing model, you know, that's stuck. It takes a lot of time to migrate off. Cloud Foundry is an open source project, and it's super easy to swap between different vendors. And one of the advantages Cloud Foundry has as an open source project is a huge vendor ecosystem. So there's a huge amount of buzz around it right now. They've just enacted the foundation to take control of the project going forward. I think there's up to 35 members now. Some of the biggest companies, some of which are here today, like HP and SAP, are all invested in providing, standards compliant Cloud Foundry implementation. So as a consumer, that's what you want. You want competition because that keeps prices low, keeps evolution going, and that is a huge benefit compared to there are other source PaaSes available. They don't have a vendor ecosystem that you can really speak of, and that is the one of I think the huge advantage of Cloud Foundry. You can see there's a real snowball effect now as more companies come on board, and it is really easy to swap. So you're not locked in. If you decide, hey, I don't want to use a public cloud offering. I want to go and run it myself in my own data center. No problem, you can do that. Cloud Foundry is kind of neutral to the languages above it and the runtimes, and the cloud is kind of infrastructure services below. So you can bring all the languages that you want and run it regardless of what that might be in your organization. And you can deploy Cloud Foundry on, on OpenStack, on AWS. There's loads of different providers that you can do. So as a developer, I think that is, when you're thinking long term, okay, we're going to invest in cloud and PaaS, where would I go to? That's definitely something to think about. Where is the vendor ecosystem? If I want to change later on, where am I not going to get locked in? And that is something that, if you're going with some of the closed source PaaS providers, they don't have that kind of story, and some of the other open source ones do not have the ecosystem that Cloud Foundry has. So I think that's why how it positions to things like Heroku and Azure and App Engine and OpenShift and all those guys.
So coming back to Heroku on this one, you can actually take any Heroku build pack for runtimes and just bring them right across and actually run them on Cloud Foundry. So that's actually one of the other parts of that ecosystem. We actually have done it actually with a whole bunch of them.
How will the pricing work though?
I honestly can tell you I don't know, because we're in beta. It hasn't been decided yet. It hasn't even been decided when we're getting out of beta. So we're actually in that point of kind of building up the service catalog, building up actually the number of instances of actually of all of Bluemix running, as well as getting customer feedback, which is actually one of the most important parts of the whole loop.
So I guess something to say as well with this, there will always be a free tier, and you'll always be able to get started. We always want developers to come and run something, and you start small, it's free. If it suddenly scales up and you need loads more resources, no problem, that can be provided as well. And again, that is a great feature of PaaS, is that normally there's always a free tier, regardless of your provider.
Absolutely true.
And as a developer, that's what you want. I don't want to have to invest in infrastructure costs up front.
Any other questions? In the back.
Yeah. So the build packs is a Cloud Foundry neutral concept. They're all open source. What a build pack defines is the kind of application environment. What libraries do you want in there? What's your runtime? What's your app server? So it's a Cloud Foundry core concept. And it's something that Heroku invented. We thought, that's great. We're going to use that so you can move between Heroku and Cloud Foundry to a degree. But yeah, you can take this, if you go to the open source project on GitHub with the build packs, there's like, dozens and dozens and dozens that you can pick from for your runtime. And you can move between any of the different Cloud Foundry providers with the same build pack. Is a core concept of the language.
Actually, just to add to that, in addition to build packs, you might be interested in the fact that we're adding support for something that are called Docker files. So actually just the other day, IBM made an announcement about support for something called a Docker Hub, where you'll be able to go out and download these Docker files. And actually, I think by the virtue of the fact that for the time being we've announced support for build packs and Docker files, you as a developer would get a lot of flexibility in deciding how do you want to proceed, how do you want to develop your applications. If you want to integrate with Heroku, that's great. Create your own build pack or fork one of the available ones on GitHub. But you'll notice that there's quite a bit of momentum behind this overall Docker container technology. And IBM has already announced support for, for that direction. So stay tuned, and I think you'll hear more about that.
No, Docker is a container. based, and this is actually a platform. So the way, you know, we're actually in the case of the announcement that Carl's talking about is in our WebSphere products, we're actually going to store everything in Docker containers and actually load them. So you end up with the speed. Actually, you don't end up with a lot of the configuration problems that you had while doing JEE previously. So we'll actually give you something that runs immediately.
Thank you. So when Carl showed you CF Push, you know, at the moment, the kind of core Cloud Foundry technology has its own kind of container technology, but they're working on changes to the application architecture so that you can include things like Docker. So you will be able to CF push a Docker file and deploy that way if that's what your kind of development infrastructure uses. As you know, we see Docker is such a huge project now, and other PaaS is adopting it, and it's something Cloud Foundry is, you know, is looking at as we speak. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.